Minister Jordan had said in one of his press conferences that the terms of the ExxonMobil contract were locked in due to what President Jagdeo had negotiated with the oil giant. Minister Jordan lamented the notion that this new administration was only able to squeeze out another 1% royalties from Exxon, up from the 1% that Jagdeo had negotiated. Mr. Jordan had also said that his government cannot release the contract because Mr. Jagdeo had agreed to several confidentiality clauses that would make the release of the contract a breach of the contract. So at the PPP press conference held on August 28th, I specifically asked the opposition leader if it was indeed a fact that he placed a confidentiality clause into the mobile contract. Here was that interaction. Did you indeed put a confidentiality clause in the ExxonMobil contract?
Most contracts have confidentiality clauses that govern the negotiating period.
He went on to say that there was a confidentiality clause, but that this government can now release the contract because the negotiations are over. However, at his press conference today, Mr. Jagdeo said that the current administration is blaming him for something he never did.
So I'll just go through a couple of things. For example, the Kiteshore News, July 23rd, 2017. The Natural Resources Minister insisted that the entire act, including the non-disclosure clause added by former President Barra Jagdeo in 1997, is under review.
The opposition leader reminded that he was not the president in 1997.
Now, you know, in 1997, I was not president, and I did not have responsibility for this sector. AFC government officials say that the contracts cannot be released because contained in them are strict non-disclosure clauses which were signed into by the PPP. It insists that these obviously have to be adhered to. Meanwhile, the APNU government officers say that all contracts should be released once they do not infringe upon security issues. And this is what he said. The initial exploration license was issued in 2008 by the then president of Guyana at the time and now leader of the opposition, Barra Jagdeo. His government would have issued the original license with the original agreement in which the confidentiality clause was inserted. This is Ramjatan speaking. He admitted that there are challenges with the contract, but said, direct quote, "We are doing everything in view of a history of where the contract is literally made secret. An amendment of the law passed by the Jagdeo administration in 2011 now. It is important we understand that we are trying our best to come out of what, knowing very well that when we have a big company like ExxonMobil, we have demanded, obviously, during those early days in the exploration agreement that it made secret. And Jagdeo and his boys allowing them that to happen and then passing along."
However, Mr. Jagdeo is contending that the ongoing secrecy and the refusal of the current administration to release the contract was not his fault. He then reached back to a document which he said President Hoyt enacted while president.
This act was signed by President Desmond Hoyt in 1986. The principal act in 4.1, restriction of disclosure of information, says, subject to subsection 2, no information furnished or information in a report submitted pursuant to this act by a licensee shall be disclosed to any person who is not a minister, a public officer, or an employee of the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission.
This document that Mr. Jagdeo has unearthed now begs many questions, namely these two. If the Extractive Act signed by then President Desmond Hoyt, prohibits disclosure of contractual agreements, why did the coalition, while in opposition, ask for the PPP to release the mobile contract? And if Mr. Jagdeo knows that the Extractive Act of 1986 prohibits the disclosure of contractual matters, why is he now calling on the coalition to release the said contract?
It wasn't specific to ExxonMobil contract. It's normal. However, when the contract is concluded, because in that period you have to protect proprietary information being shared, that once the contract is concluded, there is nothing in no country in the world that says if it involves public resources, then they shouldn't be made public.
For Channel 2 Headline News, I am Wendell Jeffrey.